The views and content expressed on the following program are provided solely for informational and entertainment purposes. They do not constitute legal advice. A podcast is not a substitute for retaining a competent, licensed attorney to advise you on your specific legal situation.
Break the business, play is work and work is play. Power into creators, have fun along the way. Break the business, doing what it takes. Celebrate success and learn from the mistakes.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the show. It is time for Break the Business, where we empower indie creators and have some fun along the way. I'm Ryan Kairalla, and it is a pleasure to have you here this week. I'm in a good mood, folks. I'm feeling so good. And for the second week in a row, the reason why I'm feeling so good is sports related. And we talked a lot about sports last week. We were very sportsy last week for a music business podcast. I know some of you probably weren't big fans of that. Our satellite radio home, Slam Radio, was big fans of that because a lot of the stuff on that station is sports talk. And I promised this week that I was like, all right, for this week, I'm not going to get too deep into sports. I'm going to stick to the music industry stuff that I know our audience wants to hear. But then something unexpected happened on the basketball court. My alma mater, the University of Miami, the place where I teach as a college professor, the University of Miami, the place where when I was 12 years old, I was a ball boy for the University of Miami basketball team, cleaning the sweat off the floors when the players fell down. The University of Miami, that University of Miami, made the Final Four, and they're playing this weekend. Now, I might sound really stupid saying all this because as we're recording this, it is Wednesday. By the time this goes up on a podcast, we may have already lost our Final Four game against Connecticut, but maybe we haven't. And it's possible that by the time you all hear this, we could be at the championship game. And then I'll be really excited. So for those reasons, and mainly for those reasons, I am very happy right now. But I'm happy for many other reasons, not the least of which is the co-host joining us this week. Producer, musician, teacher, all-around excellent human being, Zach Sloan is with us. Hey, Zach.
Mediocre person, but I appreciate the effort.
Oh, now, I know darn well nobody would ascribe that particular adjective to you, good sir. So wonderful to see you. I mean, are you catching the NCAA March Madness, as they call it? I know that none of the teams in your neck of the woods are in it, but I would be happy to save you a seat on the University of Miami bandwagon if you want to be a temporary hurricane for this week.
You know what? That sounds good to me. When you first said you were talking about sports, I thought you were getting ready to talk about my favorite sport, which is cricket spitting. But apparently, that's not where we're going. We're going with the NCAA, which is a smaller thing besides professional cricket.
Yeah, but now I kind of want to go with your thing. What is that? Cricket spitting?
Spitting, yes. It originated in Indiana. It's a sport in which people see how far they can spit a dead cricket, and the furthest spit wins.
Well, thank God it's a dead cricket. That's an important clarification. I was envisioning like you having to put one of those live things in your mouth and, you know, who knows what happens at that point. But like if the cricket's still alive, like maybe it sort of assists. Like, do crickets fly? Like, could they like fly after the
They got some good jumps. I mean, if you timed it right.
It's really a team sport if you think about it,
Yeah.
if the crickets were alive.
And to any aspiring podcasters, this is how you get fired from your podcast. When somebody is like, let me tell you about my alma mater and the NCAA, and you immediately Google world's dumbest sports just so you can derail it. That's how you get fired.
We've never made the Final Four before, Zach. This is incredible news, and you want to get me talking about insects and shooting them out of your mouth, which again, I'm not saying I don't want to give it a try. It could be fun.
No, good luck to Miami. You guys go get it. Save me a seat on the bandwagon, Ryan.
Hey, very good. It's exciting, and like that we could actually win this thing.
Yeah, you can.
I mean, not because
you're
we're
in it.
any kind of special, because it's a good team, but we're not like really great. We're like a 5 seed, but like every team that's left in the Final Four, you're saying, well, who the hell is that? Like, I mean, Connecticut's there. Connecticut's always good. But after that, San Diego State, that basketball power, Florida Atlantic University. Like, we're not even the most, what the hell is that South Florida basketball team doing in our tournament school in this Final Four? Because Florida Atlantic University, the Owls, takes that distinction. Most people didn't even know there was a Florida Atlantic University until I just mentioned it right now. But you know who would know that there's a Florida Atlantic University? One of our two guests tonight. We're going to be joined later in the show by Eric Knight and Rich Ezra, host of Mubu TV, Music Business Television. Eric Knight, a fellow Miamian, born in Hialeah. I'm sure he knows where Florida Atlantic University is. And I don't know if he's a Canes fan. Maybe he sort of inherited his Canes fandom just by growing up in Miami. But Eric, if you're out there in the green room, just know, like, you're welcome on the bandwagon too. We got a nice 3-seater on our row of the bandwagon. You, me, Zach Sloan, we're going to ride this thing all the way to the championship. It's going to be great. But these two dudes are awesome, Zach. I know you were telling me that you're really excited to chat with them because you just loved the videos they're putting together, the podcast they're putting together, all about empowering indie creators.
Oh my goodness. First of all, like, anytime people put together something that has a high production value, I'm always wildly impressed because the amount of work it takes just to do something small is nuts. Their production value is amazing. Their podcast episodes, super cool. Their show, awesome. I cannot wait to chat with these guys because they have had guests that I only aspire to get to talk to at some point in my life. So these cats have something special going.
Hey, look, they might have really acclaimed guests on there that are just blowing people away, and they may have really high production values with professional cameras, but we have Logitech webcams and Zach Sloan. So I'd like to think we're keeping up with our friends over at Mubu TV. Your silence speaks volumes.
I will say this. I appreciate your twice attempt at trying to make me sound like I am more important than I am. Ryan, you're a good friend. But these guys have a little bit more cred in the industry than I do, so I'm really interested to chat with them because what they've got going, seriously, if you haven't been there, if you haven't checked out their podcast, you need to. It's fascinating stuff.
It's going to be a blast talking to them. A lot of experience between these two folks. They've Eric's a music manager and artist. Rich, longtime record executive. They're going to give us a lot of fantastic info. Excited to have them on the show. So look, Mubu TV, they may have the expertise. They may have the production values. They may have the star-studded guests. But I don't think, to the best of my knowledge, after checking out some of their episodes, I do not believe they have a killer robot that gives industry advice. Let's go ahead and bring out our AI Overlord tip of the week. In our continuing quest to challenge our AI overlord ChatGPT to give us advice for indie creators, we have been asking it for the last few weeks to have to put in a quote from a movie as part of the advice that we are dispensing to try to challenge it a little bit, because so far the advice it's been giving is all solid, but I think it's too easy. And so this week, what we want to do is I have decided to have our AI overlord give us a piece of music industry advice while shoehorning in the hilarious quote from the hilarious movie Wedding Crashers, "Make me a bicycle clown." So that's what we're going to be going with. I don't know. I mean, did you wear out this DVD when you 10 years ago when it came out too, or is it just me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like any red-blooded American, I've seen Wedding Crashers more times than I care to admit.
Very good. So you'll appreciate the "make me a bicycle clown" quote that we're about to put in here. So here's our AI Overlord tip of the week. Hey, indie creators, it's time for our tip of the week. I love that ChatGPT is already putting a little fanfare into it. He didn't used to do that. Now they're trying to, let us know. Hey, indie creators, it's time for our tip of the week. Today, we're focusing on the value of staying humble and approachable in your creative journey. As an indie creator, you might occasionally hear metaphorical requests like, "Make me a bicycle clown," from your audience, and it's essential to understand their needs while maintaining a sense of humor. By staying grounded and open to feedback, you'll foster a stronger connection with your fans, which in turn leads to a more dedicated following. Make an effort to engage with your audience, whether it's through social media, comments, or email. So, indie creators, when you encounter those make me a bicycle clown moments, embrace them as opportunities to connect and grow. Your humility and approachability will help you build a loyal fan base and contribute to your long-term success. Now, Zach, being the friendly chap that you are, you strike me as somebody who'd be pretty good at handling advice and critique from your fans and allowing them to kind of be part of the experience for you, and you're going to take the things that they say, really listen to it, and incorporate it into your art, right?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, as soon as you started talking about that, I remember went back to actually former guest of the podcast, Ella Luna, who's putting out a record next month, and Ella Luna's amazing, and you should all go get it. Yeah, she's doing a record release in Los Angeles, so if you're out there, go check her out. But I remember I had my one, air quotes, number one indie single from a very, very tiny independent chart that I was not even going to record, but for Ella's mother was at one of my gigs, and I just happened to play that song, and she's like, man, I really think there's something there, and you should do something with it. And I thought she was just being nice and trying to humor my terrible song, and I told her as much, and she was very, like, kind but insistent, like, no, that's really something you should do. And I really appreciate that in hindsight. Listening to your fans, not just what they want from you, but like what they think of new material. These are all really good things, and being approachable is the only way you're going to get that feedback.
Yeah. Since we're going to be bringing up guests who are great examples of this, remember about 6 months ago, we had on Ryan Ruiz, the executive producer of the Dan Le Batard Show with Stu Gatz, the #1 sports radio podcast in America, made right here in Miami, Florida. Shameless plug. And he's talked in the past about one of the things that makes that show so great is not only just like the fan culture around the show, but how willing they have been throughout the year to take feedback from their fans and to openly solicit it. And anybody who works in independent sports radio or just any kind of sports media knows that sports radio fans don't give their feedback gently. They are a mean bunch. They do not hold back, and they are vicious. And if there's any industry where if you work in that industry, you want to kind of shut those people out and try not to listen to them because they will hurt your feelings, it's sports radio fans. But at the Le Batard Show, they lean into it, right? When somebody says something mean about their show, like one of their fans like says something they don't like, they'll actually retweet that mean comment. And like they want to encourage it. And when you ask them about it, they say that fan feedback makes us great. Mm-hmm. They push us, they make us better. And, it's a tough way to live because, it's no one likes to get yelled at, especially by your fans, but they say it brings them to a whole other level. And in fact, there was actually a situation on that program. They were putting out some podcast material where some of the fans are being a little mean with the hosts. And one of the hosts just basically said on the podcast, hey, you get this show for free, basically. Like, knock it off. Like, you're not paying customers. You don't have to be like this. And Le Batard, Dan Le Batard, the host of the show, actually went on the air and apologized for the people on his show who said that. They're like, no, you be as mean as you want. It's okay. We need this feedback to get better. And you're the reason why our show is so great. Our audience and the size of it is the reason why we can get huge rates from advertisers. We are grateful for every one of you, even the mean ones. Keep giving us your feedback. Yep. And so I think, ChatGPT is onto something here, saying like, be open to that feedback and let your fans be a part of that process.
ChatGPT, per usual, is coming for my job, and I don't appreciate it.
Well, speaking of things coming for your job, Zach, I've never actually gotten your perspective on this as a music producer, but I figure you may have some feelings on this. What is generally your feeling about beat licensing? Like platforms like BeatStars where people license beats online or license loops to make their tracks. Like, do you see that as a valuable thing that helps you as a producer? Or do you see that as a potential replacement for producers because maybe people are licensing beats instead of working with somebody like you?
So I'm going to go to a quote from Shannon Sanders, who produced one of my favorite Johnny Lang albums, Turn Around. And I got to chat with him in Nashville years ago, actually at a CD Baby conference. He said something very interesting to me. He said, people too often confuse beat makers with producers, and they're very different things. If all you can do is make a beat, then technology is going to get you eventually anyway. The real value in a producer, and I actually think your TikTok where you were talking about, you had the Rick Rubin thing going on, which I thought was hilarious.
Oh yeah.
But I think a producer adds so much more than just a beat. And so I don't worry about that replacing producers. I would worry about it if I was just a beat maker. But also if you're just a beat maker and you're able to get some of your stuff up on those platforms, that might be good for you. So I just think that further, people need to really understand what producers do, and it's not just putting together beats. There are some who do that, but that was never what I did. But again, I'm a rock and roll guy. Like, this falls way outside the scope of what I ever do. I mean, if there's not a guitar on it, I'm just not interested. So this is also a little outside my wheelhouse.
I guess that makes sense. I would imagine that of all the genres that are less susceptible to being replaced by beats that are repetitive and, just, have like just a consistent backbeat behind it, it's going to be rock. So that probably puts you in a good position. Well, I am happy to hear that as a producer, you're not concerned about the rise of these beat websites. Because I'll tell you, as an entertainment lawyer, I very much am. And I was reminded of my concern about beats and these beat websites and these beat licensing deals when a artist actually emailed the breakthebusiness@gmail.com email, which, by the way, we encourage our listeners and viewers to email breakthebusiness@gmail.com. If you ever have any questions you want us to answer on the show, any show topics, anything like that. But some people like to use that email as a way to try to extract some free legal advice from me. And so somebody emailed breakthebusiness@gmail.com with an uploaded a beat agreement from a beat website and said, hey, can I license this? What do you think? Love to get your thoughts. And my thoughts, I wrote back to them very nicely and said, well, I'm a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer. Here's my law firm email address if you want to go that direction. Mm-hmm. But just for kicks, I did review the beat agreement, and, it had some crappy terms in it. And it just kind of reminded me of of the many horror stories that I have come across when seeing other artists the beat licenses that they use, hearing about artists who will license a beat and put it in a song, and then they wind up getting in some kind of trouble because they violated the license agreement. They didn't realize that they did. An artist thinking that the beat license says one thing and then it says something else, and the artist gets in trouble. And so I thought for the remainder of this segment, what I would like to do, Zach, is recount the 5 horror stories of beat licenses, like the 5 things that can go wrong. Now, we have a little production behind this, or at least I hope that we do, because in true Break the Business tradition, I have given producer Lauren a completely unreasonable task where not even right before the show, but like during the pre-show music, I sent Lauren a bunch of audio files of like scary dun 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 music and said, hey, can we load these up for the show? She hasn't had a chance. Like, she's thumbs up saying we're ready with this audio, but I don't think she's had a chance to listen to it or preload it. Producer Lauren, like, how certain are you that this is going to work?
We will have noise. The level at which that noise will play will be determined when we play it.
Do we want to test drive one of the sound effects here to make sure that we're okay?
What fun would that be?
We're just going to wing it. Fair enough. All right. So here's what I'm going to do, Lauren, is I will count off like, scary story number 1. And when I give the number, then you can go the dun, 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 and then Oh, okay. We got it. All right. So, all right. I think we're ready now. All right. Let's just do it again. That's fine. So
do that every time you ask a question.
Yes, this is Scary Tales of Beat Licenses. Oh, we have more than one. Okay. All right. So this is Scary Tale of Beat Licenses number 1. And that is when artists encounter non-exclusive licenses. So not all beat licenses are created equal. Some can be very, very expensive, and some can be quite inexpensive. I've seen a lot of artists be like, yeah, I found this beat. It cost me less than $10, so of course I got it. And the danger is that some of those cheap licenses tend to be non-exclusive, which means that anybody can, so like they can license it to you for you to use it in your song, but they can also, that same website will license that beat to other people to use it in their song as well. And at first blush, you might be like, well, I don't care. Let other people use that beat too. Like I'm all for anyone being able to use the beats as long as I get to use it as well. The problem with that, and it's always the thing that I explain to artists when you have non-exclusive anything, which is that when you have non-exclusive anything, you cannot give exclusive rights to anybody else. So let's say you have this non-exclusive beat and it's a very big part of your song, and somebody like a record label or some massive licensing opportunity comes along and wants to use your song. And you're going to probably have to sign something that says that nobody else has, that your material isn't going to sound like anybody else's material, that your material is not going to infringe on somebody else's material. And so if they put your song on their page, or, a record label starts using your song and somebody else has got a similar beat out there because that beat was licensed non-exclusively, you might get yourself into trouble later. And a lot of times artists don't know the difference between exclusive and non-exclusive licenses. And sometimes the beat agreement doesn't even tell you specifically that it's non-exclusive, and you don't find out until later. So, buyer beware with that first one. Now, our second horror story. Ooh, that one was kind of slow and dramatic. It lingered out there. We should rank these. All right, which did you like that one more than the first one? Which one's your favorite? Dun dun dun.
Give me the slow burn. I love that.
Oh, you like a good slow burn. All right. So, next slow burn here, or next horror story from the slow burn is non-transferable licenses. So a lot of times when you get these beat licenses, it'll say something like this: you can only use this beat for your own purposes. You cannot transfer this beat to somebody else. You cannot transfer the rights in that beat or in any song that you create to somebody else. And you might think, well, that sounds fine. I'm the only one who's going to use this beat. Except, again, if you try to license that beat to somebody else, if you try to transfer the copyright in that song to somebody else, it's possible that depending on the terms of your agreement, you might be in violation of that beat license and you might get into trouble. And really what the theme is with a lot of these, Zach, is sometimes with a beat license, if that song pops off, if it becomes a hit, say on TikTok, or becomes popular enough that you want to use it in a TV commercial or something, these kind of restrictions can get you in trouble. Ironically, the more successful your song with the beat becomes, the more trouble you could be in depending on these license agreement terms.
Well, and Ryan, I also, as you talk about this, one thing that I think of is that whenever I produce stuff for people, we always make sure they get the instrumental tracks, because sometimes commercials want the instrumental tracks. Sometimes movies want your instrumental tracks. And if your instrumental track is one of these licensed beats, that's probably going to be a big problem.
Absolutely, because those beat agreements will always say, you can use our beat in connection with the rest of your song, but you cannot send our beat as a standalone beat separately to somebody. And so, yeah, you're exactly right. If you try to take that beat stem, you could get yourself in trouble. Here is scary story number 3 of beat licenses. Ooh. So I know you like the slow burn, Zach, but maybe you're a timpani fan. I heard some timpani there.
I would say that's my second favorite. It was close. If it could be just a little bit more drawn out, that would have taken the top spot, but that's second favorite.
This scary story, Zach, weird use restrictions. This is one that I know all too well that frustrates the crap out of me. Every time I read one of these beat license agreements, it always has some weird use restriction buried deep in the fine print. I read one recently that said that you could not use your song in any sync projects without the original beat maker's permission, which, given that that's kind of the way that a lot of indie artists make the most money off of their tracks, that's a pretty big restriction. Or perhaps the most frustrating one I've seen are the ones that will place a cap on the number of streams that that you can get with the song, as if that's something that the artist has any control over. Right? Like as if the artist can decide, oh, this song starts to become a hit. Like if the song goes viral, what are you supposed to do? Just like rip the song off of CD Baby so you don't get in trouble with your beat agreement? Those kind of terms are basically just traps, right? That is a beat maker trying to get you in trouble. And if you're in the event that your song goes viral, they can then send you an angry email saying, oh, you're in violation of your agreement. Pay me more money, superstar, with your viral video, or I'm going to bring legal action against you. It is really, really dangerous stuff. And, you got to stay away from any beat license that's going to have a cap on the number of streams. Number 4, scary story. I wonder how many of these producer Lauren has. That was kind of middle of the ground. Are you still liking your slow burn?
Yeah, give me the slow burn all day.
Yeah. So, number 4, licenses that say they're unlimited, but they're not. There's so many different ways that beat licenses will say that their license is like a full license where there's no use restrictions, right? It'll say unlimited license, premium license, and then you think, okay, so unlimited, premium, I can do whatever I want with this. And then you read the fine print, or rather you have a lawyer read the fine print, or rather you don't read the fine print because who has time to read fine print? And then you find out that there are use restrictions on the number of streams, or I even saw one where there was a limit on the number of radio stations that could play the song. I don't know where people come up with these, but really a big thing that we need with beat licenses is we need a unified system. We need all of these beat licensing companies to come up with like what it means. What does unlimited mean? What does premium mean? And we all need to agree on what it means, like in the same way that like when you look at Creative Commons licenses, right? When you see CC 2.0, you know what that means. That is a universal term. We need this in beat licenses so that artists know exactly what they're getting. And finally, scary story number 5. Contract terms that you don't get to see until later. I had a lawyer on Twitter who was talking about beat license scary stories where, and this is very common, right? You go on the beat website. This is how it goes down. You go on the beat website, you're looking for a beat, you find a beat, and you click on, oh yeah, I want to license this beat. And it'll give you like, 2 choices, right? Do you want the regular license, which has all kinds of stupid restrictions in it, or do you want the premium license? And you say, yeah, I want the premium. You click a little thing that says, that like lays out an outline of what the premium license says. And you're like, man, that's a lot of really good stuff. That doesn't seem to have a lot of use restrictions in it. That's the one I'm going to pay. And you pay a lot of money for it. Those can cost like $400, $500, $600. But you want an unlimited license because you want full assurance that if your song goes viral, you're not going to get in trouble. And then you download that license, or rather you download that song, you use that track. And then later, after you pay for and agree to the license, they send you a terms and conditions. This 80-page document that has all of these fine print. And all of a sudden, all the restrictions that you didn't think were going to be there are there. And I've heard lawyers get frustrated with this. I, as a lawyer, have gotten frustrated with this with beat agreements. And this one can really ruin artists. And so the 2 lessons here that I want to impart, really 3 lessons here. 1, you don't have to worry about this stuff when Zach produces your record. Let that be said.
It says on my website, I don't do this.
Oh, lovely. Good on you. Second thing, as I said before, we need a unified system. We need to have something where an industry standard for what goes into a beat license, and we need to get this kind of like nonsense use restrictions out. No more caps on the number of times your song can be streamed. No more caps on the number of radio stations that can play your song, because that's just trying to get artists into trouble. And finally, the advice to artists: be careful buying and leasing beats. I'm not saying don't do it, because I know I'm fighting a losing battle here. There are genres of music where beat licensing is very much the norm. I think hip hop, I think EDM, I think types of pop music. I get it. But you got to be careful in this space. And because a lot of times, especially if you're dealing with one of these fly-by-night beat websites, licensing beats can be a lot more trouble than it's worth. particularly if your song goes viral. The horror stories sound effect. That was your favorite, right, Zach? The slow burn. The horror stories are everywhere. It's not even Halloween. I feel like we're already in the mood for it.
See, man, this is why I just make rock and roll. This, this was not even these atrocities weren't even on my radar, Ryan. Man,
rock and roll isn't going to cap your number of streams. Rock and roll wants as much streaming as possible.
Yes, especially nowadays where rock and roll is no longer the most listened to genre of music. So, but all joking aside, for other producers out there, before you're ever using any of this stuff, get yourself a good entertainment lawyer and have them look at it. I can't tell you how important it is to have somebody like I am a lawyer, but entertainment law was not my specialty, so I would still pay somebody else to do it, even though I'm a member of the Colorado Bar. Like, get a good lawyer to look at this type of stuff before you ever release it, because heaven forbid any of these things happen to you.
Sound advice. We're going to take a quick break and be joined by Eric Knight and Rich Ezra of Mubu TV here on Break the Business. Don't go anywhere. Ryan Kairalla here. I hope you're enjoying the show, and I hope that you're getting a lot out of it. I do what I do because I care about creators like you. A lot. I've dedicated my career to helping creative professionals, entrepreneurs, and organizations move forward. I do it by hosting this program, and I'm also proud to do it in my legal practice. If you're a creative professional looking for solutions-oriented legal services to help you further your goals, I'd love to help. My firm RKPA does contracts, commercial law, copyright, trademark, and more. Visit rkpalaw.com to learn more. That's rkpalaw.com. Ryan A. Kairalla, PA, Miami, Florida.
Streaming services for Break the Business provided by LEK Entertainment. LEK Entertainment is a full-service entertainment company offering everything from consultations to full-scale events and productions, including audio and video productions, voiceovers, staged theatrical productions, script and music development, and streaming services. For more information, visit lekentertainment.com. LEK Entertainment wants to help you bring your story to life.
Thanks for supporting Break the Business. If you have a question or topic that you want us to discuss, email us at breakthebusiness@gmail.com. You can follow the host, that's me, on Twitter at Ryan Kair, and you can follow the show at the BTB Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, and on all major podcast platforms. And now, let's get back to the show. Zach Sloan, I had a little sticky note to remind myself that when I saw you again, I had to issue my sincere thanks for you connecting us with Wendy and Raina of Dear Marcia. We had them on the show 2 weeks ago. It was one of my favorite interviews. Thanks so much for helping making that happen.
Oh, you mean connecting you with my band? Absolutely happy to do that.
They were wonderful. So much great advice and insight. I encourage people to go check out that episode for what was a really fun interview. It's nice to have the people who like get the show, the guests who just really are engaged, and they were great. So thank you very much, Zach, for making that one happen. Ryan Kairalla and Zach Sloan here on Break the Business. We're on all major podcast platforms, all live streaming platforms, and we also have our satellite radio home at Sirius XM 145. Much love to Slam Radio for giving us a little piece of satellite radio heaven. Let's go ahead and bring out our guests this week. They are the hosts and co-founders of Mubu TV, that's Music Business Television, an online music business video channel whose purpose is to educate, empower, and engage artists, songwriters, and up-and-coming music professionals in today's new music business. Sounds like a pretty admirable goal to me. The new season of their Mubu TV Insider podcast and Insider video series premiered in February of this year. And you can find out more about our guests' work by visiting www.mubutv.com. We are happy to welcome Eric Knight and Rich Ezra on to Break the Business. Hello to you both.
Hello. Go Canes. I got a whole list here. First of all, I'm a huge Canes fan. My U of M basketball team, go Canes, go Heat, go Dolphins. So yeah, cool. Got that out of the way.
Eric Knight just trying to ingratiate himself to the host right on the front end. We love it. But it makes sense. As we said before, Eric, you are a Miamian. You were born and raised in Hialeah, one of the coolest areas in our town. So, like, you're Miami through and through. Like, even though you're an LA person, you got Miami in your blood, right? You're 305 till you die.
5. Exactly. Yep. Yeah, I'm a huge sports fan of Miami. I mean, support all the teams, and my heart is always in Florida. So,
all right, Eric Knight is on the bandwagon, Zach. As Miami.
And by the way, I'm a huge wedding crashers. I heard the reference and I was cracking up because I love that movie. Every time it's on TV, I watch it constantly. So
I love it.
Amazing.
That's
stuff.
great to hear. So, lest we not include Rich Ezra into the conversation, let me ask you this first question, Rich. You were an executive at Arista Records back under Clive Davis, which makes me insanely jealous because when I was a little kid, all I ever wanted was to be like Clive Davis's mentee or mentor. No, I'd be the mentee. Yes. That's what because so like you had like the dream job I always wanted, which seems awesome for you. Tell me that you have at least one good Clive Davis story that you can share.
There's so many stories with him. He taught me a lot. He taught me everything about learning how. The things that I learned from him really were about, learning how to evaluate talent, learning what the things are that you look for, learning how to really listen to songs. That was something that I never really fully understood until working with him. What he used to call active listening, where you don't have any distractions when you're listening to a song. You're listening to a melody, you're listening to a lyric, you're listening to what it's saying, you're listening to how it's saying it, you're listening to, are you being touched, or is this just cliched formula, as he used to say, over and out. And he was a master at identifying that and knowing how to construct material that would work for a pop artist. And he was a master at understanding who an artist was. He gave me that sense of, in A&R, of really understanding the difference between people who can go into a club and say, that's a great artist. Seeing a Guns N' Roses or a Whitney Houston, two radically different kinds of acts, and saying, that's a great artist. The difference between that and then knowing exactly the kind of record that you need to make to break those artists. They're two severable arts. And that's really what I learned from him. And that's why he was such a great master at the art of A&R. I mean, he really was a true record man. And there were very few of them in the 20th century. I mean, there was him, there was Ahmet Ertegun, there was Berry Gordy, Chris Blackwell to a smaller extent. Chris went much more on instinct, but those I think were the giants as far as record men. David Geffen used to say, about Clive that, he had the utmost respect for him because he had a totally different skill set than David. And Clive used to say the same about David, that David didn't have the song sense that Clive did or the record sense, but he had unbelievable instincts.
Do you have any insight as to where those instincts came from Clive? Because he was a lawyer by training.
Correct.
I don't think he went to music school or anything like that. Like, I'm sure he had great music sense, but it wasn't something that he trained or honed. Where did this, amazing skill of being to identify hits and hits makers came from? I've always been curious about that.
Well, I think it's two different answers. His instincts on talent, I think, were innate. They just came very latent in his life. As you said, he wasn't one of those people who was like, oh, yeah, I knew I was going to be in the music business from the time I was 7. That wasn't Clive. He had no intention of ever being in the music business. He was a lawyer. And as you said, he didn't get into the music business until he was well into his 30s. I believe that the instinct on talent was innate. I believe his instincts on songs it was self-taught. He really learned that skill himself. He taught himself that. And the way he did it was by studying over years and years and years of listening to hit songs. What were the qualities that made them great? What were the qualities that touched him? What worked in terms of structure and time, length, Um, all of those things he taught himself. How to do that. So the element on, identifying an act or seeing a band or an artist was, I think, innate, and he just he developed that skill over time. But the thing on songs, which was a different art form, he taught himself how to do that.
Unbelievable. That's crazy. Eric, can you tell us a little bit about what motivated you both to start Mubu TV?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're both, I mean, Rich has been teaching for 30 plus years, and I think I'm a teacher at heart. I never had really champions in my life in terms of, my parents and friends and stuff of that nature, but not real champions that really believed in what I was doing as an artist and a performer. I've been, touring artist for many years. And our motivation was the idea of taking education out of the classroom. And, we're so passionate about, at least, on my end of things as an artist, like you were mentioning earlier in the broadcast, Ryan, that, you really want to help people navigate this industry. You were talking about beat licenses and all the problems that you can encounter just on that topic alone, diving into the deep end of the ocean with that. Those are the kind of things and topics that, we want to uncover in our show and try to share with people so they don't make those mistakes. Because, you keep hearing the nightmare stories of the artists that just, signed really terrible deals, and now they're trying to untangle the mess that they've gotten themselves into. And so that's kind of what our mission is to try to create the next, kind of CNN of the music industry. There's that we're going to be starting to roll out soon. And so, we're just excited to share knowledge with our audience and with everybody, just you guys are.
Rich, what's been one of your favorite moments making this program with Eric?
The interviews, the sit down conversations that we've had. Eric and I have had an immense amount of joy in some of the conversations. I know, like before we started the program, we were talking about the conversation we had with the great A&R executive, John Kolodner. That was a very exciting one. Getting to speak to some of the people. I mean, we're both so grateful that people are willing to share this information. And, people say, well, how did you get so-and-so? And how did you get? By asking. That's how, by asking. People will or they won't. Some people don't feel comfortable going in front of a camera. Some people do. I've taught classes for many years at UCLA, at Travis Institute. I teach at Musicians Institute. There are people in the business who do not feel comfortable speaking in front of other people. There are some people who feel very uncomfortable talking about themselves or about their career. So the people that we've gotten, Ryan, that's been the most exciting part for me in the whole journey, is those conversations, because you learn something. If you're open and you're really sensitive to listening, you really learn something. Even though, I've been in the business for 45 years, you still learn something new from a lot of people. And we're in a business that is going through a radical revolution, a radical change. And, so much of what Eric was just saying about what you had mentioned about, beat contracts and so forth. So, on the bigger meta level, so much of the responsibility today for artists to have a career has been placed back in the artist's court. There are no longer those systems that are all in place that a manager or an attorney or a label or an agent is all going to do it for you. Now, so much of that initial work in making your career go from 0 to 40 on a scale of 100 is up to the artist. So artists need to be educated about how to do that, especially today, because no one's going to do it for you.
And would you say, Rich, that, when you think about what the industry was like back at your Arista days versus what it's like now, is that sort of, as far as you're concerned, the most significant change in the music industry since then? Or are there other kind of huge developments that you think about when you're like, man, things have really changed since I got started in this?
It's an aspect of it. I think, one of the great, there have been many significant changes. The greatest changes, as I see, in terms of what the business was versus what it is now, is we went from a copy model where we as an industry sold something, a vinyl album, a cassette, or a CD. We went to an access model. And it was the first time in our history where we didn't have an item to sell. And that produced a revolution. And it's my belief that revolutions produce two outcomes. One is the obvious, it produces a change in habits, different habits. The other is far more subtle, and it's far more profound because it's more lasting, and that is that you have a change of values. And that is what the revolution of the music business, of going from a copy model to an access model. Ryan, we live in a world today where we can get whatever we want, whenever we want, however we want, on any number of devices that we want, wherever we are in the world, and on any number of platforms, and we can get it for free. That has profoundly changed what people will listen to. On a values level, it's changed who they will listen to, meaning the values of what people respond to today in terms of an artist are radically different than they were back in, even the early 2000s. Radically different. The whole value system around that, who you are, what you're about, where you're coming from, what you stand for, what you don't stand for. Why should I care? These things, even if the public isn't aware of them, they're very, very much a part of that whole question that you just asked. And they radically affect the kinds of artists that will have careers and the kinds of artists that don't have any impact, especially today, given the landscape that I talked about. The good news for artists is that there's no more gatekeepers. That's a big difference from the past.
Yeah.
There's no more people saying, you, Zach, get the record deal and you, Ryan, do not. That's the good news. There's no more gatekeepers. The bad news, there's no more gates. They've all been knocked down. So in that world, you got to ask yourself, well, what's the most valuable commodity? And it's not money or size or power or market share anymore. It's the ability to get someone's attention. That's the most valuable commodity in media. And why? Because you can't buy that anymore. It used to be, I could say, Zach, how big do I need to make the check? And we would get results as a movie studio, as a label, commensurate with that. We don't live in that world anymore. We simply don't. We have too much choice. We have too many options. We have too many things coming at us where just getting somebody's attention today, even within your own life, you can look at that, Ryan. You can say from the moment your eyes open in the morning until they shut at night, how many times is a wife, a sister, a brother, an associate, a friend, a job, a boss, a text message, a website, an email, something somewhere trying to get your attention, and how many things do you give it to, and for how long? And then you begin to see, not only dimension with regards to your own life, but then you begin to see, Ryan, come to my show, Ryan, check my album out, Ryan, listen to how difficult that is. And that's the world we live in. And I think we're at an inflection point in the industry right now, where none of the old tropes of working, and I see this across media, none of the old ways are working anymore. We have more and more and more and more music, and fewer and fewer and fewer hits. Fewer and fewer things connecting. And that's not unique to music. It's that way in television. It's that way in movies. It's that way in books. You see it across the media landscape, where we just, we're starting to see the consequences of endless, choice. It's one of the curses.
Well, Rich, you don't need to convince me of the fact that we now live in a industry where you can get any music you want when you want it, rapid fire. Producer Lauren was able to get 5 separate dun 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 music tracks in just the time it took to start this podcast. So it's a brave new world that we're in. We love it here.
Yeah.
But I mean, Zach, tell me that you didn't also have the same mind blown feeling that I did, Zach, when Rich said there may be no more gatekeepers, but there are also no more gates. Just boom.
That honestly kind of terrifies me. I'd never thought about it that way, which is why we have guests on like this, because these are things that I think your average person who's not deep in it wouldn't think about. The other thing that really struck me was revolutions cause a change in values, and man, has that not really hit home for a lot of artists recently. Does that type of specific content get addressed on Mubu TV?
Yeah, yes, it does. We discuss that. We talk about those things in some of the conversations that we have with different people, and they say so much. I mean, I remember Eric having a discussion with certain producers and certain promoter. Your conversation, Eric, with Gary on the whole touring thing and what he was talking about with regards to the values around rock and the reality of the business today. That was an interesting conversation that brought up a lot of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole idea of, how the landscape is changing, even with a company like Gary's, which is Danny Wimmer Presents, they host the biggest hard rock and metal festivals all over the country. I think you guys in Florida have one that happens that's part of their organization. And yeah, I mean, it's just exactly what Rich is saying. We're going through this revolution. And, the interesting thing is that the record labels are even struggling now. I mean, with the whole TikTok phenomenon, I mean, they cannot gain any ground on anything that they're doing now. Again, getting back to Rich's point, because you're trying to get people's attention. So it's an interesting kind of conundrum that everybody's in right now because of the fact that the DSPs, as we know, as of today, 100,000 songs are being uploaded every day to Spotify, all of the DSPs. That's an enormous flood. It's like the spigot opening and just not turning off. So for you to try to break through that noise now, it's going to take, it gets back to having superior songs. The songs have got to be just superior, and your messaging and who you are as an artist and the message that you're trying to get across and what you believe in, who is your avatar. And it's not being all things to all people, because that world doesn't exist anymore. It just
Eric,
doesn't.
In the course of interviewing the folks that you've interviewed on the Mubu TV Insider podcast and Insider Video series, was there a moment where you heard something from a guest that just completely changed your perspective on some aspect of the industry, changed your worldview, changed a preconceived notion that you had based on your own experience in the music business? And if so, could you tell us about it?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's something that changed the way that blew me away, but what I did love is that a lot, because a lot of our our insiders, we call our audience insiders, they have preconceived notions about A&R people and why they sign this band and why they do this and why they do that. One of the things that I picked up, which has been pretty much across the board with most of our guests, spanning whether they're a music supervisor, a music publisher, A&R guy or girl. And what that thing was, the idea about trusting their gut and, that gut feeling of listening to what moves them, and then in turn believing in that artist and acting upon that and moving forward with a guest. I can't tell you how many people in that world that we've discussed that talked about the whole idea of like, I'm basing everything on my gut, not because they had 1 million followers on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, because that's another preconceived fallacy that people think, because they have a lot of people, they're getting signed, and that couldn't be further from the truth. They're signing acts that don't have any social media presence, because the record labels, as Rich has said in the past, what they're really good at is becoming amplifiers. Once an act is at a certain level, a label can come in and completely take that from point A to point Z, like overnight. And so those were one of the things that I picked up on, that a lot of the people that are in the world that, you guys interview and that we interview here on our show, is that they base a lot of their stuff on their gut.
Wow, that's powerful. Rich, can you tell the viewers and listeners a little bit more about the upcoming season of Mubu TV, the Insider Podcast, the Insider Video series? I know it's already started for a couple months now, but you got some great episodes coming everyone's way. I would love to hear more about it.
Yeah, we release a episode, a podcast every week, and a video episode every week. We put a podcast out every Tuesday. We put a video episode out every Wednesday. We've interviewed executives like John Kolodner. We've interviewed executives like Michael Alago, Don Passman, who's a world-renowned music attorney. We have, up and coming, we have, Toby Wright, who's a very famous hard rock record producer, airing this week. Eric did a wonderful interview with him, got into his whole philosophy. Upcoming, we have, who are some of the people, Eric, that we have coming up over the next couple weeks?
We
I'm
have
just trying to
Sass
think.
Metcalf. Yeah, Sass Metcalf, president of Cobalt. I'm trying to think of some of the people. My God, it's been such a blur for me.
Sabrina Del Priore, who's
Sabrina
the
Del
senior
Priore
VP
from Paramount.
of Paramount Studios. They run the empire of Paramount, Paramount Plus, CBS, MTV. All of the streaming services, BET. She's doing music strategy for all of those. So that was a really interesting conversation. That's coming up. Who else do we have? We have a lot of music supervisors. We have Andy Ross.
That we just
who's
did.
a great music supervisor, coming up, talking about the whole role of music supervisors, how that's changing, and about their struggle right now for union representation as a profession. So that's a great one that's coming up. Who else do we have? We have A&R people from
Andrew Grant from Atlantic
Records.
We have also Johnny Minardi from Elektra A&R coming up.
That's
as
right.
well too.
Yeah, VP of A&R from Elektra coming up. Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of great ones coming up in a lot of different areas. We also have a lot of international people, Ryan, who talk about, Eric did a wonderful interview last year with a guy named Tej Brar, who is really making inroads on the whole live scene in India. That's going to be an enormous music market. They have the whole technological aspect down, and now they're really making inroads into live performance in terms of opportunities for artists outside of America. So that was an interesting one. We also did one with Vikram Meha, who's the head of the Indian Music Association. We just did that one last week. So those are just some of the episodes that are coming up and some of the areas that we're going to be covering.
You bring up an excellent point about India. I read something on Twitter recently where somebody said that 10 years ago, 200 million people in India had access to the internet. Today, that number is 800 million. Mm-hmm. So when you think about what that means in terms of the number of consumers in the music industry and the increased economic power that country is going to have, it's going to have a lot of influence on what the industry looks like going forward and create a lot of opportunity for creators. Very, very exciting stuff. You can find out more about our guests' work and check out their programs by visiting mubutv.com. That's MUBU TV.com. Our guests have been Eric Knight and Rich Ezra from Mubu TV, the founders and co-hosts. We've had a fantastic time. Gentlemen, this has been an absolute pleasure. We're big fans of what you do. And before we let you go, we'd love to get each of you to answer our final question. We'll start with Eric. Eric, do you have any last tips for the indie creators out there to help them move their careers forward?
Well, I think, never give up. It's a roller coaster ride. I can speak for it myself. I've been a musician all my life, and it's a roller coaster that we're going through. And I think other tips that I would give is, start assembling your team early. If you need help with songwriting, start hooking up with songwriters and start writing and becoming, a master of that, because that's really without the great music, you don't have anything. And I think it's just assembling that team of believers. That's not mom and dad, but people that are actually doing this. And I think that's going to go a long way.
Rich Ezra, same question.
Yeah, I believe that, excuse me, I believe that the artist of today has a great opportunity to have a career independent of labels, independent of a lot of aspects that were not possible in the past. However, I feel that in order to do that, there's got to be a commitment to learning about this business. And I will say, as an educator for the last 40 years, it has never been easier to educate yourself than today. You don't have to leave your home. It will all come to you. The information is out there. YouTube is out there. The publications are out there. They will come to you. Please start reading, start becoming aware and educated about the world and the business that you want to make your career in. And I say this to people who are serious about a career, not a hobby, Because music, as you know, Ryan, music can be a wonderful hobby. And we know a lot of people that have music as a hobby, and that's great. But if it's to be your career, if it's really to be where you're going to make your living in it today, you have got to learn about the business that you want as your career. No one's going to do it for you. And as Eric says, the more you do that, the more you will attract a great team. And you will learn by doing this, you will also learn who the real people are out there and who the people that are not so real, because you'll have known, because you'll have done that work. It's like, you, Ryan, who the good attorneys are, because you are one and you've been on the front lines of that. So you can smell that kind of, inauthenticity when you encounter it. I think it's the same thing for artists. Educate yourself. It's never been easier to do, and you don't have to leave your home, but you do have to do the work. That's the crucial part, is do the work, and the career is there for you.
The new season of the Mubu TV Insider podcast and Insider video series is available now at MubuTV.com. Rich Ezra, Eric Knight, thank you both so much for being on the show this week.
Thanks, you. Guys, thank you so much for having us. Really appreciate it.
Our thanks to you both. Our thanks to Zach Sloan and producer Lauren. And thanks to all of you viewers and listeners for checking out Break the Business. We'll see you next week.
Break the business, play is work and work is play. Power into creators, have fun along the way. Break the business, doing what it takes. Celebrate success and learn from the mistakes.